The tutu adjective only has two forms of the adjective for all three genders, masculine, feminine, neuter. So what happens is that the feminine form here shares the masculine, uses the same masculine form. So both the masculine and feminine form of the adjectives use the second declension masculine endings. So if I were to draw a line here, os, u, o, on, oi, on, ois, u. So you'll notice that these are, in fact, the second declension masculine adjectival endings. And the feminine, even if the adjective modifies a feminine noun, it will use these endings to modify the feminine noun, but they would be identified in the parsing as a feminine adjective. So I'll give you an example of this in a bit if this seems a little bit confusing. But the word aionios, by the way, means eternal. And so while there are not a lot of tutu adjectives, often the few tutu adjectives that we do have are used quite frequently. And so therefore you need to know the form. And then the neuter form has its own separate form. And as expected, it uses the second declension neuter ending. So it's on, u, o, on, a, own, ois, a. Draw a little bit of a crooked line, but that does the trick. So let's actually, so these are the forms, and I simply wrote them out for you. Forms that you'll be familiar with. But let's see them in use, and then you'll be able to understand how the tutu adjective works. So let's look at this first example. Hey aionios zoe. Notice that hey is a feminine definite article. Zoe is a feminine indefinite article. And aionios, although it uses the second declension masculine endings, this will be parsed as a nominative singular feminine adjective from aionios on, this is lexical form, where the fact that I wrote only two adjectival endings, not three, indicate that both the masculine and the feminine form share aionios as its adjective, and then this is the separate neuter case ending on. So the way I would translate this is the eternal life, where aionios here is a nominative singular feminine adjective. So though it uses the second declension endings, it is a feminine form. And that's how the tutu adjective works. Now notice this one here, the second translation. Hoi uranoi aionioi. This is a nominative plural masculine definite article, a nominative plural masculine noun. And then this adjective is also nominative, plural, and masculine. And this is a D, N, A pattern. We would write this as the heavens, parentheses are, so as the verb me is implied, eternal. So the heavens are eternal. And because this is modifying a nominative masculine, nominative plural masculine noun, we would expect the adjective to be nominative plural masculine. And how about this emphasized form? This D, N, D, A. These are neuter nouns, the works. And we know that if in a D, N, D, A pattern, this adjective plus definite article is a way to emphasize the adjectival use. So we translate this as the eternal works. This is a nominative plural neuter form. It could be accusative because the accusative shares the nominative case endings. But let's just say that it's a nominative plural neuter form, because the noun that it modifies, an article that's used, is also a nominative plural neuter article and noun. And this is In this form, we know that eternal is being emphasized in some way. Lastly, by this time in our vocabulary, you have learned a fair number of conjunctions. Some are independent that connect two separate sentences, two independent sentences, and some are dependent. So kai, which means and, is one independent conjunction. Allah is but, and this is a strong but. It's a fairly, what we call an aversive but. It's a conjunction that makes a strong contrast. De can be translated as and or but. Depends on the context, but it can have both meanings. So while it can contrast one part of the sentence with the other, it's not a strong contrast like Allah is. And then we have gar, which means for. And if these conjunctions introduce a clause, that clause is what we call independent. It can stand alone. But some clauses are dependent. That means they're by themselves, they're not standalone sentences. So hati means that or since. So if I say since I ate the food, since I ate the food is not a sentence by itself. It's a clause, a dependent clause. It depends on the main part of a sentence. So the main part of a sentence is I have a stomach ache. So since I ate the food, I have a stomach ache. Since I ate the food or that I ate the food would indicate that it's a dependent clause using hati as a dependent conjunction. Hina means in order that. It's often used to introduce a purpose clause. Aeon means if, sometimes when. And kathos is just as. And so this is a nice summary of the conjunction you've learned so far in one chart. Lastly, some other small points of grammar so that you won't be confused by the homework exercises. The plural neuter noun takes on a singular verb. This is almost always true. Whenever you see a plural noun used and it's neuter, so it doesn't apply if it's a masculine noun, doesn't apply if it's a feminine noun. With neuter nouns that are plural, oftentimes the neuter nouns, which are usually things, are seen collectively as one item or one subject, and they will use a singular verb. So with this sentence, ta euangelia tu cosmu, uk estin ek tu theu. Ta euangelia, the Gospels of the world, or the fake Gospels, but the Gospels of the world, because ta euangelia is neuter and it's plural. Notice what verb it uses. It uses estin. It doesn't use asin. It doesn't use the plural form of the verb. It's using the singular form. So the Gospels of the world, okay, is not from God. Now, in English, this doesn't sound very good. So you'll probably translate this as English are not from God. So even though in English, just to make the English sound correct, we say are not from God, the Gospels of the world are not from God, we know that in Greek it's written with a singular verb. Final point, this might seem difficult to grasp from the very beginning, but it's an important point because to know because you're gonna see in your homework. An article can be used as to introduce a relative clause. So the best way to explain this is simply use an example. So let's look at the example. Ha Jesus apen, tous anthropois tois para tain thalassen, hati ami ha wias to theu. So here's Jesus said to the men, and notice here we have a D and D article, and then we have this prepositional phrase, which is, so para plus the accusative is alongside of. So if I were to translate this, this is Jesus said to the men or people. And then we have this D and this whole prepositional phrase, para thalasan, is in the adjectival attributed position. So it's being used like an adjective. And this is a perfectly good grammatical form in Greek, but it seems really odd to translate in English. How would you translate it? So the way we do this is if you see a DNDA pattern and what in the attributed position, you don't have an adjective, you actually have a prepositional phrase, and you'll see this often in Greek. Then the way we help translate this in English is we try to approximate what it means in Greek into an equivalent English translation. And so the way I would translate this phrase is to the men or people, and I'm going to put parentheses. I know that this is not here, but who are, this is implied, alongside of the lake or sea. So Jesus said to the men and who are alongside the lake or the sea, or who were alongside the lake of the sea, that I am the Son of God. Hati emi ha huias tuteo. So this is an example of when you have a DNDA pattern, and what's in the attributive use is not an adjective but a preposition. Insert the word who are, or if it's a past time sentence, who were. That's inferred. Put it in parentheses because you know it's not there literally. And then it'll be to the men who were or alongside of the sea. And that concludes our lesson.